Very first thing I'm going to want to know is what was the biggest leadership surprise that you discovered in your first time managing people?
Truthfully, it went the way I thought it should. I thought I was doing like a really good job. Like, oh, this is how you lead people, and it goes well. All the things, not realizing that I was just running people into the ground, not realizing that I was creating an unsustainable culture. God, like that's what they remember. I was pushing them to work 23rd of December when I could have just as easily already told them to take that day off. Now I work that way.
Welcome to the Ronan Pessar podcast, where we explore the skills of emotional intelligence that can be used to improve outcomes at work or at home. Live with KD. I am so stoked for this. I got to just start by saying, Kevin, you were one of the first people I followed on LinkedIn back when I got involved in early 2020, and I was like, this guy is so sharp. He's got it all. Like, he knows what is up. It's like you read my mind. I was in a SDR leadership role, and you were talking about one-on-ones and talking about KPIs and people management. I'm just like, this guy gets it. And so here we are now, all this time later. I get the opportunity to actually chat with you about it.
Let's go.
So welcome.
Hey, pumped to be here, man. Very pumped to be here, and pumped to see your journey, right? From call it consumer of content to curator of content to creator of content, and all that, man. It's been a journey for you as well, man. So well done. Congrats.
Thank you. Well, I guess just to kick things off, for those who are living under a rock and don't already know who you are, I can read off the amazing list of awards you've won, but I think one of them that really just stood out to me the most is the fact that Salesforce called you a top sales influencer to follow. And I know they put a lot of effort into that list, and the folks that are on it are people that I've looked up to for a long time. But tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days, and just by way of introduction of who you are.
Who am I? I'm Kevin Dorsey. I am a son. I'm a father. I'm a brother. I am a husband. I am a sales leader, and I am someone that cares about salespeople. I truly believe in trying to help make people better, and that is how I try to operate on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. I am blessed to be the SVP of sales and partnerships at Bench right now, so I lead the revenue teams, the partnership teams, the expansion teams there, and then do a lot of things on the side in terms of consulting, coaching, courses, things of that nature. And so, that's who I am and what I'm up to now. And, just day in and day out, baby. It's all the same.
First leadership role. Let's get into it. So when was it? Where were you? And the very first thing I'm going to want to know is, what was the biggest leadership surprise that you discovered in your first time managing people?
Jeez, my first time managing people would have been right out of college. So when I was running like the personal training studios, and I was managing a team of trainers there. I was managing salespeople there, and was managing like the business. And truthfully, I look back at that, and it went the way I thought it should. I thought I was doing like a really good job. I didn't actually, I think, learn any like huge lessons from that one. It's like, oh, this is how you lead people, and it goes well. All the things, not realizing that I was just running people into the ground, not realizing that I was creating an unsustainable culture. Like one of my biggest learning lessons as a leader, and I preach this to my leaders and people I work with. We probably say this on a weekly basis, if not sometimes a daily basis. I am not you. You are not me. We are not them. They are not us. And you have to remember that as a leader, because I am not you and you are not me. We have different goals. We have different motivations. We have different skill sets, insecurities, everything, right? But we are not them. They are not us. There's a reason why we are in leadership. We think differently. We act differently. We work differently. And so to expect people to work the way that you work or think the way that you think as a leader to your team is unfair. So that was one of my biggest early learning lessons there. And it's really, I've really tried to embrace that throughout my career. I don't think it really stuck until towards the end of my time at Snack Nation, was when I really was like, this is a switch I need to make and flip as a leader.
Was there a story or a person who comes to mind when that flip happened for you?
So yeah, I'll share this. Like I had kind of already made the switch. But like one of like my nicknames at Snack Nation was KD the Savage, right? That was my nickname as a leader, and it was like it was all in good fun, but there was a let's say an ounce of truth to that, and this is when it really stuck with me. It was my last day at Snack Nation. I'd been there for 5 years. I had built that from nothing into a incredibly high performing sales org, selling snacks in a box, right? Like think about like my career trajectory, like to build that into a $30+ million per year business between snack, no ROI, no cool software, nothing, but ran it like a SaaS business. Two people got up there, Mallory and Kelsey, and they got up and like they were, everyone's telling their stories of KD, and they're like one that will forever stick with me. And they read an email that I sent out on December, it's like 22nd or December 23rd. And in that email, it was like 4 o'clock, or no, it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had just gotten out of my one-on-one with our CEO, and like, sales had been like tough that month. It's December. And I've been like standing up for like the team. Like, look, it's December. Like they're putting in the effort, da. And then we walked out of the office on that day and like everyone was already gone at 3 o'clock. And I wrote an email out to the team going like, what the hell, y'all? Like, it's like, I understand we're in the holidays and I understand we're here, but like, I just spent the last hour like vouching for you and like nobody's here. Like no one's still putting in that effort. I am still here, blah, 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 and all this. And this was one of like one of the lasting memories of me was that moment. And they told it in like a positive, like kind of like a ha funny of like, look how far we've come, but also like helping raise the standards. And I listened to that going, God, like that's what they remember. They remember that I was pushing them to work on the 23rd of December when I could have just as easily have already told them to take that day off. Now, I work that way. I'll work to that last minute, but that was an unfair expectation. I'll never, ever forget that because everyone was laughing and everyone was having a good time with it. And, I was listening to that going, wow, that's what they remember. Like that's something that stood out to them in the 5 years that I worked here. Like, so that was a moment for me of like, okay, that's not right. And that's not the way I lead anymore. I've grown a lot as a leader since then, but that's one that stands out to me.
It sounds like not only that was transformative for you in a healthy way of being more self-aware, but that you're generally like very self-aware and reflective of how people perceive you. Do you think that that's a superpower of yours when it comes to leadership?
I think I guess it depends on how we define superpowers, right? Like, is a superpower developed or is a superpower grown? I think I've always been very self-aware. I will call that a superpower. How I perceive other people's interpretation of me has been a skill to be developed, right? Like I've gone through like the full spectrum of like caring heavily about what people thought of me, like too much as a leader, right? You want to be liked, you want to be loved, you want to be all those things, to then going full, pendulum the other way. Like, I don't care if you like me or not. Don't even care. Deal with it. This is the world that we're in right now. You're in my world, live in it. And now I think I've found that balance right in the middle of like how that should be.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I can't help but think about my own internal needs as a human and how sometimes that conflicts with my job as a leader, where if I have a need, as a child, if I wasn't given that kind of love enough and now I'm constantly seeking it and I'm a people pleaser and now I'm in a leadership role, that starts to show up in a bad way where suddenly I'm looking to do projects that I'm not qualified to do, or I don't have time to do. And I start saying yes to everything and I start showing up and I start enabling learned helplessness for my team. Because every time they ask me a question, I want to be the good guy and the yes man, and I want them to love me. So, I think that is a trap that so many people can fall into, is when it comes down to it, like, how do you become aware of your own shortcomings so they don't show up to pull you out of what you're trying to do as a leader?
Yeah, it's asking yourself those questions. It's doing a lot of that inner work, right? But like, if people forget though, right? Like, one, to be loved, you have to give love, right? Like, are you loving your team? Are you loving to your team?
Or you asked them to work on December 23rd at that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like, and even that, right? Like, I wish I could go back and actually read the email, because the intention behind it was pure. It was a pure intention, right? Like, my goal has always been for my team to succeed for their sake, for them to succeed to where they wanted to be. And so when I looked at that situation from the lens I was in at that moment, I've got a team that's complaining that they're not making enough money, and then a team that is out of the office by 3 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that language actually was connected to, like, y'all have told me you want these things. Y'all have told me that this is what you want to do. And I'm fighting for these things for you. I need that fight to come back as well. This can't be a one-way, side of this. And so it's like that love can be there. But again, people too often confuse like love with, what's the word? Not lenient. Well, yeah, like love versus leniency.
Soft. Like,
right.
Not,
it's like,
not being candid. Not saying it like it is.
Nobody would describe me as easy to work for. Nobody. But also the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority would say I'm worth working for. Right? Like, I will challenge you, but I challenge you because I love you. I will push you, but because I love you. And that's where it comes from. And that you could G-check me on that all day long. You could spot check. You could talk to people and be like, yo, KD, and they'll probably give you the whew, did he pushed me, he challenged me, he
set a high
me,
bar. Yeah.
But then you could follow up on that question and say, do you believe he cared? Like, oh, without question.
Let's get into that. That's big. I mean, I know you've read Radical Candor. You know about Kim Scott. Like, you just actually summarized her whole book in that one story right there. Like, how do you like help people learn if you're teaching other executives? I know you work with VPs of sales all the time and other executives. Like, how do you teach Radical Candor? Because you seem to have come to it naturally.
I think what was it? I was the second best for I think a long time. It was the obnoxious asshole, which is the second best leadership style, right? When Kim breaks it down, it's actually better to be an obnoxious asshole than it is to be ruinously empathetic and what's the fourth one?
I just called the last one the absent leader. I don't remember what.
Right, yeah, I can't remember which that one was. Right, so like the candor was there, but the care was not, right. And so now, like, as I've grown, it's expressing that from day one. Like, from day one, it's like, look, I want you to understand that I'm coming from a place of care. I actually learned this a lot, even from like the coach that I work with, Townsend Wardlaw. Talk about like creating yourself. Like, so even before I'm delivering, excuse me, before I'm delivering candor, what he calls it is like recreating yourself. And it's like, so if I were to be delivering some tough news, he's like, so Ronan, I need to have a conversation with you. Now, what I need to make sure you know is who this is coming from in this moment. Who am I'm being? This is coming from someone who wants to see you succeed. This is coming from someone that truly wants the best in you. This is coming from someone that sees the best in you. This is coming from someone that truly believes you can accomplish more than you are right now. Can you hear me from that place, please? So I've just recreated myself. You know who's about to deliver this message. And then this is where we need to improve. So then once you know that's who I am as a leader, it changes everything, right? And so it's being like, I work with managers and directors on this. Like, do you care about your people? Like, do you? Well, of course I care about my people. Well, 1, have you told them? 2, have you shown them? And 3, do you remind them? Do you remind them that you care? Or is it a one-off Slack message of, hey, way to go, Ronan? Like, what kind of BS is that, right? So, like, you have to be very intentional. Back to my word, right? You have to be intentional with this. And you do that long enough that people know. Like, they know. And, I'm working, and this takes time, too. Like, you have to get into this. I'm building these relationships where I am now at bench, and getting there. You could talk to people at Patient Pop. I was there for almost 4 years. And it's funny, if you were to ask them, this was in like one of my performance reviews one time. They described me as a cold burn, meaning like you're never going to see KD raise his voice. He's never going to yell at you. It's actually the opposite. In fact, sometimes I wish he would yell. I wish he would like express that, but instead it's this cold burn. Like, he'll just look at you and he'll just ask the question and and you can feel it, and it's just there, and it hurts worse than if he had actually called you out for something. He'll ask you a question like, was that you at your best? And he knows what your best is, and he's asking it because he cares. And like, that's more, like, that hurts more than, Ronan, you need to step your shit up. It's like, Ronan, look at me real quick. I believe in you, right? You know I see the best in you. You know I've seen you do amazing things, and you know that I know what you're trying to accomplish right now. I want you to look at me right now and tell me if you are living that way.
Wow.
You're like, ooh, it's a cold burn.
I'm getting chills just hearing you describe this. I mean, that right there is a talk track for anyone who wants to live like this kind of a leader, being a professional, empathy-led leader, but who also gets results. Like, it's interesting because I've talked to people who start from the empathy side and then come to be more of a hard ass, and people start on the hard ass side and then develop the empathy. But you got to have both if you want to hit that radical candor perfectly square on the head. You need both pieces of it. You got to show them you care, but you also got to say it like it is, and call out the crap, call out the poor performance when you know that's what it is. You know, I'm curious to hear though. All right, so that's when you've got your team. How does that work when you're working with folks cross-functionally or even up towards executives? Does that apply the same way, or does it change?
Yeah, it's the same. It's absolutely the same, right? Because they're all people. They're all people. And I talk about this in one of like the segments I teach on like managing up. It's like the moment you remember that your boss is a person with emotions, egos, flaws, insecurities, it changes that whole dynamic. Like you remember that. I think too often people hold people above them to too high of a standard in terms of like, oh, like they should have it all figured out, or oh, they're already perfect, or that they even think that they're perfect. I believe the vast majority of people do have good intentions. Not all, but the majority of people have good intentions. They just have poor execution. And the moment you start to question their intention, you're putting a label on them versus like, dude, they had good intentions. It was just bad. They did what they believed was best in that moment. And that's all we're all really trying to do. You just have disagreement on what is best. So it's the same managing up, and it's establishing that from day one of like, who are you from day one? And if you've never established that, have that conversation. Here's who I'm going to be moving forward. Here's how I'm going to communicate moving forward. I have a whole document. I think it's 6-7 pages called the Unofficial Guide of Working with KD. Unofficial Guide of Working with KD.
Brilliant. So you're giving other people tips to work with you well.
Oh yeah, it's the first thing I gave to my whole executive team at my new company. Here's the unofficial guide of working with me. Here's who I am. And it talks about who I am, not my role, not what I've done, but like my daughters and my dog named Goat and where I grew up and all of that thing. And then underneath it is like, here's how I communicate. Here's how I like to be communicated with. Here are things that I'm good at. Here are things that I'm bad at. I'm going to be very open with those things from day one. Right. And it's all spelled out there. So like, like, okay, like perfect. And you learn about self-awareness. Okay. I have gotten feedback that I can be intimidating. So I've put that in my working with doc of like, I have received feedback that I can be intimidating. What I want you to understand about who I am is I am very passionate about what I do. I am never in any way trying to intimidate or anything. I just take myself very seriously and have a very high bar. That's spelled out. Another one, anyone that's ever worked with me would tell you this. Like, I wear my emotions on my face. You can tell. You can tell how I'm thinking, I'm feeling, but I have a very serious thinking face. So like if you were explaining something to me and I'm really trying to understand it, I'm going to look at you like this. Now, how could that be interpreted? I know we're on an audio for this, right? But anyone that watches the video can see it in the road. How could my face be interpreted right now if you were telling me something serious?
Well, I'll call it the resting face.
Right.
I don't know. There's something there that it's like, it's a little bit challenging. Like I sense it's like, is he doubting what I'm saying right now?
Right. It can come across as like he doesn't like what he's hearing. That's completely spelled out. I have a very serious thinking face.
How did you identify that? Did someone say to you, do you know when you think you make this face?
No, but someone would people would stop and like in a presentation, it's like, oh, you hate it. I'm like, why do you think I hate it? It's like, well, dude, you looked like you were angry. I was like, no, I'm just thinking. Like, I'm just thinking. But I was like, oh, if one person finally said it, that means tons of other people have always thought it. You catch it, you document it, you grow from there.
That's incredible. I would love to see this document selfishly,
Here,
just because I'm curious. I tried this once with a boss, and then about a month later, he poked fun at me in front of the whole executive meeting that we were in. Like, yeah, and Ronen sent me this whole document about how to work with him, and I'm like, haha, just get me leads. And I'm like, oh God. That was an example of leadership that you don't want to copy.
Right.
But
Hold up, let me share my screen real quick. I will share my screen. I'll
heck
give you
yeah.
a little sneak peek for anyone that watches the video on this.
Oh,
So
I'm
it's
excited.
right here, the unofficial guide of working with Kevin Dorsey, who I am, the women that I have in my life, Jess and my daughters. What are my core beliefs? What's my favorite word? What's my favorite quote? What have I achieved?
Oh,
And
I
then
knew I liked you for a reason. That is a
operating
powerful
guide,
word.
how to communicate me, how I communicate. This is a big one. I will often pause before answering. I'm okay with silence as I try to figure something out. WWKDA, what would it ask? Look at this. I just told you. I share my emotions on my face as anyone that's ever worked with me.
Underlined.
I furrow my
brow.
brow when I'm really listening or thinking. It doesn't mean I'm upset. It just means I am thinking. Management style, data driven, hands off but not aloof, accountability, my operating approach, results, key flaws, spelling. I'm a horrible speller. Gave up on it a long time ago. Email and Slack. I stay out of email and Slack most of the day. So I might miss an email. I might miss a Slack. If it's important, come talk to me. I'm told I can be intimidating. It is not intentional. I'm just passionate. Design. I don't make pretty things, pretty docs, pretty presentations. I get the basics down and that's it. I'm an 80-20 person. I like to get things to 80% of the way and get going so I can miss small details sometimes. And this is a big one. I don't enjoy wasting time, so I can get antsy or frustrated in meetings if there doesn't seem to be a point. I am patient in the long game, but I am very impatient in the short game. I like to make changes fast.
How long did it take you to actually put this together? Like, what went into that?
So I learned it from a book called The High Growth Handbook by, I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Elad something, not Elon, but Elad. Go look it up. High Growth Handbook, I believe is what it's called. And then also some ideas from Ray Dalio's Principles, where he talked about like the employee baseball cards, talking about strengths and weaknesses.
Oh, yeah.
So I combined
Great book.
and built this. And so then what do you think I do? I got my managers making their own and my directors making their own. When I joined my latest team, this was the first thing I shared with everybody. So you have it, right? So like this probably took to write it the first time because I was just working from scratch. Now I share this with people so they can work from it and like update it and like kind of like change it. It probably took me like 2 to 3 hours to do. Right.
And this is the book. This is the High Growth Handbook right there.
Elad Gil. I knew it was a G. I just couldn't remember what the last name was. So I built it probably 2 to 3 hours, and then I update it as I go, like as I get feedback, as I learn. There's things that I've changed in here. I've grown as a leader. If anyone's familiar like with the DISC profile, I used to be a full ID, D. I have shifted over my career in terms of like my leadership style. So it changes. So there you go. Leadership, my leadership handbook is right there.
Wow, that's incredible. So last thing on the handbook, but do you think that's a tool that any new leader should start to make for themselves to become a more effective leader?
100%. And like, we can share this afterwards if people want to look at it, because oftentimes this will make you a better leader because you never thought about it. How do I communicate? Because I've never really thought about like, how do I communicate? Is that actually how I want to communicate? How do I like to be communicated with? Have I ever actually explained to my team how I like to be do I even know how I like to be communicated with? Back to your earlier question of self-awareness. If like in there, so the WWKDA, right, is just a long running acronym across my leadership teams. What would KD ask? Not what KD do, what would KD ask? If you've never even asked yourself the question, how do I like to be communicated with? Then you don't have an answer to that. And because you don't have an answer, well, then no wonder nobody's communicating that way with you, because you've never conveyed it to people.
It makes total sense. If you can't be clear with what you want with yourself, how could anyone else know? They can't read your mind, and they certainly can't come up with that for you. That's really powerful, especially for all the new leaders out there who might be listening or watching this. Like, to be able to go deep. We just talked about this on the last episode, but look, when you're in a sales role, an individual contributor role, your whole value is about what you can externally produce, what you can externally create. That's how you create value. As an E, it's the deals I create. As an SDR, it's the deals I generate. But if I'm a leader, the value that I create starts inside. The stronger my ability to introspect and grow myself internally, the more impactful I can be as a leader. because I'm not directly doing any of the work per se, but I'm contributing to everyone else's ability to be greater. So as a leader, you've got to go inside and work on yourself constantly. And this is something that you've got. This is something that you've got right there. If you were coaching a first time leader, I think this is a big one for folks that I hear from all the time. They're often really nervous about two big things. They have this imposter syndrome, like, oh man, I'm going to be found out. Like, so people are going to realize, like, I got this promotion or I got this job and like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So there's a confidence piece. And the second thing that might come from that, from a lot of them, is they try to say yes or do everything. How do you start to balance the workload? Because what ends up happening with almost every first-time leader I've met, and happened with me too, is you turn around one day, a few months in, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. I have so many things spinning. I can't reasonably deliver on any of these projects well. So how would you coach someone through that?
So to me, again, pure style, start with a question, right? It'd be like, what is a manager's job? What do you believe a manager's job is?
The manager's job is to be able to get each individual on their team to be able to do the best of their work and their role to their job description without all the distraction of corporate development that's going on in the background. So they have to both be the liaison, helping the development from the head, but allowing for the safety and security for their team to do their role the best they can do it.
Right. So I'm a simple worded man, right? And this is always fun. I always tell people to do it, and then they go and do it, and they're like, damn it, you were right. You could ping my managers and ask them what their job is, and they will know, and they will tell you. Your job as a manager is to make your people better than they could have on their own. Period. So then once that's established, that becomes your filter on what you were saying yes and no to. Is what I'm doing right now making my people better than they could have on their own? No, then you shouldn't be doing it. The manager's job actually is surprisingly, if done right, simple and borderline boring. It should be primarily focused on like 4 to 5 things. Frontline managers, hear me real quick. Call reviews, so you know what's happening. Practice, that's the only reason why you listen to calls, is so you know what to practice. One-on-ones, right? Running great one-on-ones with your reps, right? Where you're getting into the performance, into the metrics, into their goals, into how they're being as a person. And then issue diagnosis. Diagnosing what's causing the results, good or bad. What's more important than those 4 things as a manager? Like, funny enough, man, I when I joined Bench, met with the different leadership teams. I was out to dinner with one of my teams, and meeting for the first time, right? So we're chatting it up, whatever. And I told him, I was like, something I can promise you is going to frustrate you working with me. I'm just going to tell you, right? From day one, I'll tell you, is how often I'm going to pull you off things. You're going to want to be working on all these other things, and I'm going to constantly pull you back sometimes to the foundational things that need to be done. So, for example, I don't care if my new hires know how to create an opportunity yet, because they don't know how to book an opportunity yet. So no, we're not going to train them on how to create an opportunity in Salesforce in their first 4 weeks. You know why? Because they're not going to book their first opportunity until week 5 or 6. So I don't need to teach that to them now. So it's things like that, narrowing that focus and really looking at, like, is what I'm doing actually making my people better? And this goes for being on calls with reps. Is that making them better? It might help them close that deal, but it may not be making them better, and you need to be very careful with that, right? So that's how I help. And then I look at their calendars and we prioritize. We build the calendar around those 4 things, and everything else fits in, as opposed to trying to fit those core 4 things in. So that's how I work with a new manager first, is make sure we're aligned on what your job is, understand what it takes to do that job, those 4 things, build them into your calendar. You fit anything else around, and if you can't fit the other things in, then it probably shouldn't be there in the first place.
It's amazing. You've got your order. It's like you got to hit these 4 foundational things before you can start to do the other stuff. This is what the foundation is going to be built on. And if you have a shaky foundation, the building comes down. So you can't build on top of having a team that isn't being supported and able to grow, identifying areas where they need to improve and having a plan for that improvement, which is basically what you just outlined with those 4 steps. It's like, get everyone to be better.
I talk with teams all the time. We're like, all right, like how many reps do you have? Right? They're like, God, I got 6 reps. And I go, cool. And they're like, I'm so busy. I don't have time to X, Y, Z. I was like, all right, well, if you have 6 reps, quite literally, you could spend an hour per day with all 6 reps every day. Are you? No, I got like a 30-minute one-on-one. And it's like, then what could possibly be more important? What would happen if from 8 to 9 I had Ronan, and 9 to 10 I have Kimmy, and 10 to 11 I got Alexis, and 11, like hour every single day, every single, like, you know how amazing that team would be if that's actually how you spent your time? But it's to all the other things. It's all the extra meetings, right? I have that in my working with Doc. I hate stupid meetings. I hate them. I will chop them immediately if I look at a meeting.
Do you actually decline? Do you decline them and not show up?
Oh, fuck yes, I do. Sorry for my language. But I hate, like, I can't stand being in a meeting that has nothing to do. So if it's like the first time, like this already happened, I'm living this. That's why I think sometimes my content resonates with people, because you can tell like I'm in it. Like I'm not like talking about like what happened. I'm talking about like what's happening right now. I was added to a new recurring meeting at my company 2 weeks ago. I've gone to 2 of them. Might be the last one that I go to, because I've been in 2 of these meetings, and it's only 30 minutes, but it's 30 minutes where nothing gets done. And there's 11 people in that meeting.
This is worth exploring and giving some guidance on here, Katie, because I think the thing that newer leaders know is what you're saying to be true, but what they don't know is how to handle that. You know, they're nervous about maybe making the right impression, good impression, and if you don't show up to that recurring meeting, or maybe worse, their ego is fed by it. They feel good about sitting in the meeting. And that's a double whammy. One, their ego is getting inflated artificially, and 2, they're wasting their time. So it's like, how do you actually have that conversation to say, like, I can't be here?
Right. So it depends on what level you are at and what the goal of the meeting is, right? So I'm the SVP, so I can kind of make that call. I'm like, you know what, I'm not coming to this anymore. But to your point, do you think there's managers on my team that would love to go to that meeting? Right. So I'm going to delegate that meeting to someone who wants to be there.
That is brilliant.
Okay. So this is now, again, delegation. I look at it as like, I don't want to be at this meeting. I don't need to be at this meeting. Is there someone on my team who would want to go to this, who that would actually make them feel good? So you saw, like, you're like, this could be an ego thing. I'm going the other way. It's like, yeah, it could be an ego thing. Hey, Ronan, this meeting every single Monday on the historical books, the goal of the meeting is just to make sure we're always aligned on these types of things. It's not something I think I have the capacity for. Could you be my eyes and ears in that meeting?
That is brilliant, KD. That's actually brilliant. I mean, you're flipping it into something you don't want to be at or can't spend the bandwidth or time, and you're turning it into a reward. You're showing someone you trust them. You're giving them a big responsibility.
It's a good thing for them, right? And they can learn, but then you have to earn that, right? Of like, wow, Katie's entrusting me with this, right? So that's one way that I'm going top down of like, all right, I don't want to be in this. We need representation. All right, is there anyone that could or should? Second is, if I'm in a meeting now, managers, this is how you manage out. If there's a recurring meeting that is just like worthless, you need to understand what the intention of that meeting was. So say it's I don't know, this is going to fire people up, but whatever. Say it's the weekly forecast meeting, right? And there's like 3 of them in a week, which is great. But as most people know, in that forecast meeting, maybe only 2 deals get reviewed, and then it's nothing, and everyone's just sitting around doing nothing the whole time. Okay, well, what's the intention behind that meeting? The intention behind that meeting is that second line and top line leadership understand where deals are at and what should come in and what the risks are. Is there another way to accomplish that is not that meeting? Like, I don't know, a deal management checklist. Like, I don't know, an end of week report being sent up to it's like, what questions leadership is asking in these meetings, so why not preemptively get ahead of it? So then it could sound like this. Hey, so Ronan, every Tuesday and Thursday we have these forecast meetings, and I feel like the goal is to understand like where deals are at, but we only get to go into like 2 deals, so we don't even get full exposure. Could we try filling this out at the end of every single week of the deals that are in pipe in this stage, when they're supposed to close, the top 3 questions that you ask, and that way you get it from everybody on Monday, and you have it, and we only have the meeting if you want to go further into it, or you make comments and we can go back and forth. Could we try that? That would save 15 people from being in this meeting every single week. So now, me as the VP, I'm getting what I want, because hear me out, your VPs don't want the meeting either. They don't want the meeting. They want the information. They just think that's the only way to get to the information. So get me that information in another way. There we go, right? Get ahead of it. Be preemptive with it. That's the way that you can manage it as an IC or as a manager trying to manage up.
That's awesome. I can't remember which company it was that did this. I want to say it might have been one of Elon Musk's company, but like they started charging people to sit in meetings. Like they put a dollar value to it, and it changed the entire, in like a month, the whole company culture around meetings changed because people suddenly realized like, oh, hey, wait, this is costing how much? So when you actually put that dollar value to it, it totally adds the lens to what you're saying. It's like, hey, can this meeting be a report? And if we need to go deeper, we can keep it optional and go deeper.
And it can go the other direction too, where it's like, look, okay, we are all getting together, and this is a $30,000 meeting. So we better create $3 million worth of value in here. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you can have an expensive meeting, it's just, are you creating value from it? For me, meetings are not about updates. It should be about action. You can update me in a document. You can update me in an email. If we're talking, we're getting into it, we're solving something, we're creating something, we're making progress, moving forward. That's the key.
So let's keep pulling on that thread just one more layer deeper, which is like, all right, generally, if I have things that I got to deliver some sort of tough or bad news to a higher up, something like, I don't think this meeting is a good use of time. You just gave us a great framework for that one specifically. Like, how would you guide, again, someone who's newer to this to say, like, look, if you need to deliver bad news, here's what I would do?
So I guess depends on the level of the bad news, right? The faster you can deliver it, the better. And ideally giving the leader the opportunity to digest it before the conversation. So say we had a one-on-one coming up, and I don't know, what would be a good example? You found out like a rep was, cheating the system somehow. Telling me in that one-on-one is going to get a much stronger emotional reaction because it's the first time I'm hearing it. Whereas if you hit me up in the morning and go, hey, Katie, in our one-on-one today, I want to make sure we have at least 15 minutes to talk about so-and-so found out that they are, logging deals the wrong way. Here's what I've already done about it, but I just wanted to get it on your radar and we can discuss further this afternoon, right? So you're being preemptive, right? Because one of the things it's in that doc, this is so good, and my leaders would tell you this, something that frustrates me more than anything is if I find something out. Because if I find it out, it either means you missed it or you were hiding it. Both of those are not good looks for you as a leader, because I'm not in there trying to find these things. But like, if I find out that reps aren't working leads properly, or I find out reps are using discounts the wrong way, that's an issue. Whereas if you brought that to me and said, hey, Katie, found this out, you're going to be mad. You're going to be mad. But I found it. I want to talk about what we can do about it in our next session. I say, okay. All right.
Using labels like that, it's not just for sales. It's not just Chris Voss talking about negotiation. It works great for any kind of de-escalation of emotion, which is actually how Chris describes it, by the way. If you read the book, Never Split the Difference, or watch his masterclass, he describes it not as a sales tactic, but as a way to de-escalate highly emotional moments. Is you say, hey, you're going to be mad. He calls it the accusation audit. Like, call out all the things that they're going to say before they say it. And then you lay it in, and it's not as bad when you help people with the label, because we all know, I mean, if you have, I've got little kids and they don't emotionally regulate. That's normal. That's like developmentally very normal. But adults also still struggle to emotionally regulate sometimes. So helping them with a label helps them to process the emotion faster, right? And that leads to a healthier discourse and dialogue about what's going on. That's brilliant.
100%. 100%.
Kitty, I so appreciate the time you've been spending so far with us. I want to just leave with one last thing. What is like one more golden tip you want to share with folks who are looking to just be the kind of leader that they would love to work for?
Well, one is actually thinking about what that is, right? Like, what type of leader do you want to work for? But I'll put the asterisk next to that because remember, I am not you. You are not me. We are not them. They are not us. The type of leaders that leaders like to work for are sometimes different than types of leaders non-leaders like to work for. So you want to be careful with that game. I guess my parting tip would be like there's all these sales methodologies out there, but there's not really a great sales leadership methodology out there, right? We've got Challenger, we've got Spiced, we've got Medic and MedPick and Bant and Value Based and Sandler and all this, but it's not like a leadership methodology. So I created one. So this will be like the parting advice. It's called BIPSI. And BIPSI stands for behaviors, individual, process, skill, and you. Every revenue challenge, every person challenge you are having as a leader falls into one of those buckets. Either it's behavioral, they're not doing the right things, right? The things that are in their control, they're just not doing them. It's individual. Either the individual's not in a good place or the individual's not in the right place. Meaning something's going on with that individual that you need to try to find out and address, or it might be the wrong role for them. They might be a good individual, but it's just the wrong role. Like, I'll never be an artist. I don't have the attention to detail to be an engineer. I probably don't have the patience to be in CS. It's just not the right fit for me in terms of who I am. So it's the individual fit. Process, is it documented? Has it been trained on? Do we have examples of it? Skill, are they just not good at the thing that they need to be doing? Or you as the leader, have you been coaching them? Have you issued diagnosed? Have you been recognizing the behavior? Have you had the goal conversation with them? Have you been taking care of yourself as a leader? So the BIPSI methodology is how you look at any sort of situation you're having within a team. And the more you can narrow down, the better your results will be. So that would be my parting thoughts for everybody.
That's incredible. Where can people find out more about the BIPSI methodology, what you're working on, and how to interact with you more?
So, I mean, you can definitely, follow on LinkedIn. I'm at the stupid, connection request things, but I have a little something called the Sales Leadership Accelerator coming out soon. And a lot of this and that will be in there. So I appreciate the time today, man. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we can have you back. This was an awesome conversation. KD folks, go give them a follow. And for everyone else, happy hunting.
Well, appreciate it, man.